protesters, but the Unite the Right rally is happening about 100 yards in front of the fence line, and it looks like it's tough to get a count because we can't, but it is a small crowd. And again, you know, they wanted to have this white civil rights event, but they're only, it appears, talking to each other because, again, there's very few press. There are no other outsiders who came to protest this event. But, you know, there are thousands and thousands of people.
Well, we apologize for that obscene gesture that was just flashed on the screen by one of the Antifa, apparently, counter-protesters. You know, they, by the way, cover their faces, as you can see. They get all dressed in black, and they got their helmets, and they've been known to be violent in the past, not just against the white supremacists, but also against the news media, you know, and others in the past. Have there been any incidents where you are, Peter, of that sort of thing? Peter, can you hear me? No, may have lost.
Yeah, I hear you, Eric. And so far, we haven't seen anything like that, but there are just so many people. And I do see among some of the counter-protesters, there's a strong smell of marijuana in the air. And I can see somebody lighting up a joint right here just in the park across from the White House, you know, with hundreds, if not thousands, of cops all around. The signs are mostly anti-white supremacy, anti-Nazi, but then there are some it seems like anybody with a cause in D.C. Is here, and the numbers are enormous compared to the Unite the Right white civil rights march. They were brought here by police protection. Nobody could really talk to them, and then they have now stayed basically isolated now that the event is going.
So, Peter, have you, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is Arthel. Have you had a chance to talk to any of those with Jason Kessler's group? And why is it that they're so adamant to maintain white civil rights?
No, Arthel. They were not talking to the press, and the organization that was done, this website, they were specifically told that 2 dozen, 3 dozen, whatever it is, people who came, they were told not to talk to the press, and so far they haven't.
Yeah, Kessler was speaking, kind of giving a stump speech earlier, holding the American flag backwards as he stood in Lafayette Park. Clearly one of his aims and strategies is to try to make a huge media event with this type of confrontational politics that he engages in. These 3 dozen or so, surrounded by thousands and thousands of others denouncing their cause. Peter, thank you. Arthel?
Peter, thank you. And then meanwhile, a few blocks away from where Peter is, you have the group calling itself Shut It Down D.C. Coalition organizing a counter-protest, outnumbering those white supremacists. Griff Jenkins is live at Freedom Plaza for that part of the story. What's it like there, Griff?
Well, Arthel, it's still peaceful, but it's gotten a little more exciting. There was a few people in the crowd that threw a couple of smoke bombs, one of them over the fence to the OEB next to the White House. That raised the alarm of law enforcement. They went to a stronger level. As you can see, this is Antifa. Behind me, you can see this. It says, takes a bullet to bash a fash. Clearly aggressive language. As we're making our way, we're headed up 17th Street. This is Pennsylvania Avenue. That is Lafayette Park. That is the White House over there. You can see the heavy law enforcement presence to make sure that this crowd does not go into Lafayette Plaza where Unite the Right and Jason Kessler is. But what we do see is a little bit of the typical, unpredictable, spontaneous Antifa actions, which is to go up and down the street. The message, by the way, isn't just going towards Kessler and Unite the Right. This group, upset with the Trump administration, believes they're fascist, and there's an anti-police message as well. Arthel?
Oh, Griff, thank you very much. And joining us for more on this is Washington Examiner political reporter Al Weaver. And Al, as we continue to watch the live pictures there in D.C., I want to ask you, listen, if in fact this guy, Jason Kessler, is trying to promote the propaganda of white supremacy, white nationalist, and if his idea, as Eric said, this is a media ploy to get attention, would it be more helpful, I guess, and to avoid the potential for lots of violence, to have this group speak to the president directly to find out what their concerns are, have some sort of meeting at the White House? If I'm not even sure if I feel that they belong there, but this is not about me, so I'll keep it quiet. But in this, for the sake of America and us being a united country, to have the president speak to these people directly, so to avoid this sort of display.
No, I know what you're saying there. I think right now this group, they're obviously getting their share of media attention right now. They've only have, as reports have surfaced, that they've only have a couple dozen members in D.C., but you can't start a fire without a spark, and right now that's the spark that's really causing a lot of these counter protests. These also, there's also obviously peaceful protests going on, mostly throughout the district. But right now, I mean, they're getting their share of the media attention, but we're going to have to wait and see. What really is going to be interesting here is what happens. How does the president respond to this? Last year, obviously, he came under a lot of fire for his response to what happened in Charlottesville. What he says is going to carry a lot of weight, obviously, in the next couple of weeks as we move toward, obviously, throughout August and into September past Labor Day.
Well, we know that the president hesitated to reply and respond to what happened last year when Heather Heyer was killed. And then when he did respond, he got lots of criticism for not being tough enough on the white supremacist groups who were out there, who started this and who were held responsible for the unfortunate death of Ms. Heyer. You had the guy who was charged, James Alex Fields Jr., charged with second-degree murder, a Kentucky native who was there in Charlottesville, Virginia last year, with a military record, saying that he joined the Army in 2015, only active for less than 4 months. But the president came out saying that there were bad people on both sides, when I think a lot of people wanted him to be more clear and to admonish the white supremacists who started this 1 year ago. So why would we think that the president would react differently this year?
Well, you'd hope that he'd learn his lesson this time around. Obviously, last year, there were a lot of political implications for him. At that point last year, that was deemed probably the lowest point of his administration. Obviously, a lot of people were very upset by that, even within the administration. That was a real low point for the White House at that point. And right now, we're about less than 3 months from a midterm election. And right now, there are a lot of people who do not want the president to be talking about this, especially the way he did last year. Obviously, they would like for him to come out like Ivanka Trump did this morning and say, we reject all forms of white supremacy, we reject all forms of neo-Nazism, all that type of stuff. But we're going to have to wait and see on that. He's got to come out clear and strong on this. Otherwise, he's going to have it coming to him again, probably. But
Ivanka is not the president.
Correct.
President Donald Trump is the president. Now, he did tweet in the last 24 hours saying that he denounces all types of racism. But again, do you think that we need to see the president come before a camera and address the country to quell this sort of racial tension that has really increased in the country? Not just there, that is what we're looking at right now, but just across the country. People are on edge, emotions are high. So do we need the president to be consoler-in-chief and come on and say, listen, everybody, I am your leader, and I am the leader of this entire country, and I speak to you, all of you, who are out there inciting violence for whatever your reason is. We need to stop it.
He can be the consoler-in-chief, as you mentioned, if he really wants to be. I think that's the big point here. Last year, obviously, came out in that press conference and he made those comments, and that did not help matters one bit. If he's going to come out this year and do what President Obama did after the situation in South Carolina a couple of years ago, then yes, that would be a good idea for the president. But if he's not, then you got to wonder what he's going to end up doing after this. This is right in front of the White House. It's right in Lafayette Park. Obviously, he's up in Bedminster this weekend, so he's not on the ground, and that's not a concern necessarily for his safety or anyone in the White House's safety in that sense. But yes, he's got to figure out what he's going to do on this, and what he does one way or another. The politics of it are going to be heavy.
Well, listen, it's a Sunday afternoon in August, so I'm not sure if you've been able to contact any of your normal folks there in D.C., but if you did, let me know, and if you heard anything, please tell me. Have you spoken to anybody, any of your normal contacts? Have they made any statements to you?
Not at this point, no. I mean, right now, the big thing is, what a lot of people are looking at, pointing to, is there's 24 protesters out here for the Unite the Right protest right now. That's obviously, it's down from 250 that were in Charlottesville last year that really made the waves and led to those raft of counter protests and the injuries and the death of Heather Heyer, as you mentioned. So right now, I think that's the focus, that it's only 24 people, but still, it's really causing a lot of big situation in Washington at the moment. 24
people causing a lot of strife,
exactly.
And they're with gasoline around a spark that is so ready to ignite. But because you point out, Al Weaver, that you have only like 20 to 30 of these white supremacists out there protesting with Jason Kessler, whose permit, by the way, expires at 7:30 p.m. But because this group did dwindle down from last year, does that say to the president, listen, these people are in the minority? I mean, these people with these extreme views. So maybe that will give the president more encouragement to speak out, because I know that he's very concerned about his base, as any politician would, which is not to say that all of those people who support President Trump are racist. We're not saying that. But we do know that a lot of the people in that group with Mr. Kessler are who they are, and they support the president. So take it away, Al Weaver.
No, I think you got a point there. Obviously, there were 250, as I mentioned, last year, about 2 to 3 dozen this year. And even last year, they were in the minority. I think that's something we got to say, obviously. Last year, they were in the minority. No one is saying that Trump supporters are racists and whatnot, the folks in, obviously, these swing states and whatnot. But this group right now, they have a voice right now, and they're out in Washington, and they're making it known. Even just by their mere presence, obviously, it's attracted thousands down to Washington to rally against them, and obviously this is taking over the news today, and this is probably going to be in the news for the next week or so. How the president comes out and announces this, if he does, or if he comes out and does whatever, that's going to be a lasting impact right now, especially in a month right now, I must say, without a lot of news happening in the sense. It's August in Washington. All the members of Congress are home. Congress is out of session. The president, obviously I mentioned, is in Bedminster. So it's a quiet news month usually. And this is obviously sucking up a lot of the oxygen at this point.
So then if there is someone to advise the president, who would that be? And what exactly would they tell him in terms of how to handle this current situation here in the middle of August?
Well, I think first off, you look at his family. Those are the people that he looks to a lot of times. I mentioned Ivanka earlier. Melania Trump, I'm sure, is in his ear about this. You have the rest of his cabinet, and also the members of Congress, who, if President Trump does come out and do the same thing he did last year, they're going to come out and speak out against it, just like they did last year, and just like they have in various situations over the past year. I don't think they'll hesitate to do that.
And listen, we're looking at these signs out here. I think Peter pointed out that you've got a lot of people out there with something to say. They're not just there because of Jason Kessler and the white supremacist group. So you just saw the sign impeach Trump. So everybody's taking advantage of this situation. Any propaganda they have to sell, here they are on Front Street. Shouldn't the president shut this down?
I'm not sure if he should shut this down necessarily. As we mentioned earlier, obviously there's free speech at play here, and these people, they have the right to do as they please in that sense, up to a certain point, obviously. But I think the president right now, he's the main figure in this whole thing. This whole thing, Charlottesville, this whole thing this morning, even though I shouldn't say a whole thing, it's not that big of a thing necessarily. His response is going to be absolutely critical here. He needs to come out and if he doesn't want a political problem on his hands, he will come out tonight or tomorrow at some point and make it clear that this is not welcome here. He'll hold a press conference. He'll hold a statement from the Oval Office or somewhere in the Blue Room or somewhere of that kind, and he'll come out and say, this is not welcome. We can't have this. Even take questions on the subject. That could even help quell some of the craziness around us. So
you're expecting an official statement in front of the seal of the United States of America and not via Twitter?
I can't say I'm expecting it, but I think it would be a decent idea.
Al Weaver, political reporter, Washington Examiner, thank you very much.
Thanks, Arthel.
And although it has been 1 year since the tragic death of Heather Heyer and the two state Virginia police troopers, they were killed when their chopper went down monitoring the protests in Charlottesville. And today, a year later, the scene there in that quaint colonial town was largely quiet, except from reports of some Antifa protesters attacking the news media. Doug McCoy has been there. He was there last year at this time and has been there all through this weekend with the very latest, where hopefully it's largely quiet. Hi, Doug.
It's gotten a lot quieter since I last talked to you, Eric. In fact, we are standing right now on Heather Heyer Way. This is the exact spot, as you can see from the flowers down here, where she was struck by that vehicle driven by a white supremacist last year. Her mother was here just about an hour ago, dropped off some flowers here, surrounded by young people wearing purple T-shirts, her daughter's favorite color. And this is the scene that remains. But it's very, very quiet here. As I was telling you earlier, I believe, the Antifa people kind of filter in and filter out from various different areas, and we're at a point in the day where they have largely gone away. There are none here, maybe a few, but the main pedestrian areas, and this is a change since we last spoke to you as well, are still blocked off by large trucks like this one here. All the main streets in the central downtown area have large trucks like this blocking any vehicle penetrations, but the pedestrian entrances have just been reopened in the last few minutes, so people are free to come and go without being subject to police checks of their belongings, and that's the change. So we'll see how that goes. As you mentioned earlier, there's been a little bit of violence here, not a lot. I think 4 arrests over the last 2 days. One we saw just a little while ago when a group of Antifa demonstrators, while Heather Heyer's mother was here, got into what appeared to be a scuffle with a cameraman. One of their techniques, as you know, is to get in the face of camera people, to put their hands in front of the camera lens or paper in front of the camera lens to try to block what people are trying to make their living doing. And I think a cameraman got frustrated. There was a little scuffle. And unlike what we saw last year, at that point in time, the state police became very, very proactive. They jumped onto the scene, pulled the scufflers apart, booted a couple of the Antifa people out of here. I think there was one arrest at that time, but they were very, very proactive and sending a very clear signal that they intend business here and they don't want any kind of a repeat of last year. The Antifa people got their morning started earlier today at about 9 o'clock in Booker T. Washington Park, where they held a rally for which they had not been permitted. Anytime you have a gathering of more than 50 people here, you are required to get a permit to rally, and they did not do that, but police let it go. They stayed out of the park and let the people have their rally. And then after the rally ended, they decided to march to the downtown area. Again, they didn't have a permit for that march, but police were again very cooperative with them, actually asking them if they could escort them downtown. They couldn't find who was in charge of the march, though, and couldn't find out from the people in the front of the cavalcade of marchers who was in charge and where they were going to go. So they said, we'll provide an escort for you anyway. So they're doing both carrot and stick here today. The stick is if they see violence, they jump into it right away. The carrot is they're being very, very cooperative with people who are obeying the law. And that's the latest from Charlottesville right now.
Doug McCoy, it's